Another form of protectionism are import quotas. And what these do is that they set a limit on the amount of a specific good that can be imported into a country in a given time period. I'll try to explain it through the graph and build the graph as I explain it. And I'll do it by weaving this real world example that's happening right now. So after the Russian war in Ukraine has caused Ukraine's GDP to fall by about a third. So the EU is trying to help Ukraine's economy. One way they're doing this is by removing all forms of protectionism from Ukrainian imports. So tariffs, import quotas, these were removed. The problem now that some countries are facing, especially in Eastern Europe, is that Ukrainian goods are flooding their market at a lower cost than what their producers can make, the domestic producers can make. Especially in goods such as grains, wheat, and sunflower oil. So this is leading some Eastern European countries like Poland, Slovenia, Slovakia, and Hungary to favor reinstituting some forms of protectionism on Ukrainian exports to protect their domestic industry. Because Ukrainian goods are at a very low price right now, and there's no realistic way that the domestic producers in those countries can compete with them. So I'll use the example of Hungary when explaining this, and sunflower oil. So here you can see the domestic market with world trade. Before world trade, Hungarian consumers were able to buy sunflower oil at P1 and it was produced at Q1. However, with world trade, with trade from Ukraine and other countries, the price was able to go down to price world. And now they're able to Q3. So the quantity has moved from Q1 to Q3. Therefore, consumers are able to afford more sunflower oil. However, look, we have to consider all the stakeholders in this. Before, domestic producers in Hungary produced at Q1. Now their production has gone down to Q2. So even though the quantity supplied has gone up and consumers can enjoy more at a lower price, creating a consumer surplus, domestic producers are hurt by this. Since before, their revenue was this whole area, and now they're only producing up to Q2 and selling at a lower price. Therefore, the revenue has fallen. And so Hungary didn't like this arrangement, and they instituted an import quota. That can be seen here at the line on S2. And this point here, which I'm going to mark in red, is the limit that the government imposes. So now, instead of foreign producers producing from Q2 to Q3, they produce from Q2 to Q4. So only this area now. However, one benefit is that they can sell at a higher price because the new price is here at P2. So now, this is the revenue that foreign producers can make in this box here. Meanwhile, domestic producers take up a much larger role, and they produce where they were before up to Q2, but now at a higher price at P2. And they also sell here from Q4 to Q5. So this here is a new revenue box for them, which shows how domestic producers are helped. Another stakeholder are the consumers. So here, Hungarian consumers would have a higher price to pay for sunflower oil and therefore sunflower oil goods, and they're getting less because the supplied used to be Q3 with the world market. Now, with a protectionist import quota, consumers are only buying up to Q5. And so the last stakeholder, the government, they get nothing from this because there's no tax revenue being collected and there is no expenditure happening. They're only placing a legal barrier on the amount of imports that can come in. So there's no detriment to the government in this sense and no gain. Now, since consumers were buying up to Q3. And now the quantity supplied shifted left to Q5. There's a dead weight loss, a consumer surplus loss. This, which is going to be represented by this triangle here. So this here is consumer surplus loss. In order to find this on the graph, just make sure to look at where the quantity was produced before and the quantity supplied now, and go up from that from there through this line here, and you're in between. If you can read the graph, you can tell that this is just dead weight, something that existed before and it no longer exists. The other half of this triangle here also represents dead weight loss, but a different form of it. Instead of consumer surplus loss, it's just the dead weight loss caused by inefficient domestic producers, which can be seen here in gray. So this dead weight loss, this is value lost in the economy. This is inefficiency and represents the negative aspect of protectionism, especially import quotas. But you'll see dead weight loss in multiple forms of protectionism. So to sum it up, this has no cost to the government, but it also gives no revenue to them. As far as the consumers, they have to pay a higher price at P2, and they also have less quantity supplied and less quantity demanded. So it's an overall loss for the consumers. There's also a social welfare loss in the Hungarian economy, since there's dead weight, producer inefficiency, consumer surplus loss. However, the domestic sunflower oil producers will earn greater revenue and produce more, which is the whole reason that the government is instituting this import quota in the first place, since the domestic producers are being outcompeted by the cheap Ukrainian goods. And finally, the other aspect to consider are the foreign producers. Their share in the market falls. They do sell at a higher price because now they can sell at P2. However, they're still going to lose revenue because before they were producing from Q2 to Q3, and now they're only producing from Q2 to Q4. So even with the higher prices, their revenue will fall. So really the only party benefited are the Hungarian domestic producers. However, following the reasoning of the government, that benefit shouldn't be discounted since they employ people inside the country. So there's benefits to that. However, it's also good to consider the drawbacks of these types of policies. Especially going back to the foreign producers, this is especially important since consider some of the countries that are being protectionism is being instituted on. In this case, Ukraine, but often it's less developed countries. And even Ukraine in the tough situation that they are now, with massive economic shocks because of the invasion. Protectionism severely hurts these countries, especially in a time that they're already experiencing lower economic well-being. So sometimes it's important to consider the international aspect of this, and of course, there's always the potential, the idea of retaliation, loss of goodwill, and the Ukrainian government is already criticizing some of the measures that countries such as Hungary are taking. So there's that aspect to take in as well, the international relation aspect. So ultimately, as always in economics, it really depends what area you want to prioritize because there's drawbacks, but there's also gains that can be got from instituting quotas.